Welcome to Change and Change Control, Change Management. I apologize, I cannot find this lecture. I cannot find my PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to wing this and just talk with this lovely single picture up here. But I am pretty passionate about change control, and so I did want to say a few things to the class, even if I don't have slides. Change control is process analysis. There's lots of reasons why people would want to change something. It might be a change because there's new functionality that's available. It may be a change because there's new rules and regulations that need to be met. It may be a change because there is a process improvement project that has identified some areas where you could increase efficiencies, increase the quality of data collected, improve the quality of patient care in a hospital setting. For all of these reasons, you need to have a good change management, change control process in place. Ideally, as we've talked about in adoption phases by users, you need to include users on some level in the change making process. An example of this might be having super users designated in the department, or SMEs, subject matter experts is what SME stands for. They may be in the department and have interdepartmental meetings where concerns, issues, process improvement projects may be being discussed. So you have a group of 10 or 20 people in a department. One person is a spokesperson. That subject matter expert a lot of times may have some technical skills. They should have a good understanding of the system and how it functions, and to mitigate some of the silly change requests. So let's say this nurse doesn't like the order in which their assessment is laid out and wants to do it this way, but another nurse disagrees and thinks that this item should be first in the list. Something to that nature. This super user or SME should be able to have that conversation at that level and understand the change management, change control process to help communicate to those users how long the process will take, potentially some other areas that would be involved, and come up with a good plan for that single person, the SME, to bring it to the larger change control meeting. Some of the things that are often asked of changes are research, best practice, standards, evidence-based information, something out there that proves the change that you're asking for may have some support nationwide or some support in the clinical world. It's not just because I didn't like the way it looked. This SME should be able to help communicate that to the end users and gather information before the SME comes to the larger change control meeting. The next level of change control might be all of the department SMEs getting together, perhaps with a quality risk management person, maybe a fiscal person, and medical records person. Again, some other areas that maybe aren't documenting in the system, but have input into how that documentation can affect other areas or downstream effects. So for instance, if the OB nurses that are taking care of newborns want the vital sign assessment laid out a certain way, when that SME comes to the next meeting, the NICU nurses and the pediatric nurses from their department, you're going to have a representative, and somebody will remind them that all three of those departments are using the same document or same layout, and so if you change it for one, it would affect everybody. And so that's the next conversation that needs to be had. How is this change going to affect let everybody have a chance house-wide, but still in a controlled environment, have a say. Generally speaking, there's an informatics analyst involved at that point for the IT department or at a hospital level that can gather all of this information and make recommendations, also provide the feedback and expectations of how long the change will take, maybe provide some insight and help be a liaison between, say, the fiscal management or medical records department and the clinicians, and explain it in a different way so that everybody at the table understands. That clinical informatics person may then be part of yet another change control meeting that is smaller but happens at a very, very, very technical level. The process I came from was a ticketing system where once I, as the informatics analyst for the hospital, had heard everybody's pleas and requirements and wishes, and I felt I had appropriate information to present it, and I felt that the change technically was possible, and I felt I understood all the impacts to potentially some other places or other departments, then I could submit this ticket, and during the change control meeting, that ticketing process would allow us to, throughout that week, make updates or comments or suggestions to that change to prepare us for the meeting, where then someone else, like the interface analyst, may say, you know what, that's great, they want to change the name of that form, but they've got an ampersand in it, and the interface won't handle the ampersand. And I could be like, oh crap, I didn't even think about that. So this meeting is at a very high technical level where the final decisions can be made if the change is acceptable and agreeable. The other thing that happens during that technical meeting is an overview of the change calendar and project calendar as a whole. So there may be a server upgrade going on in 2 weeks. And so maybe this change would be best done during the server upgrade because there's already going to be downtime. Or any kind of scheduling like that. There might be a holiday coming up or some function that wasn't realized, or several of the support staff may be out at a conference that wasn't realized, and so it's best to do the change, schedule it so that the support staff are not out at a conference and they're available to help. These are all things that would happen during that meeting. And the ticketing system or application that's being used will help track those changes. Aside from personality type issues, right? The NICU department wants one thing and the PEDS department wants something else, or the ER wants it done a certain way. Aside from those types of issues, what needs to be communicated as an expectation and need to be understood during change control is some of those other inner workings. I have examples where a form name has been changed. Somebody doesn't think anything about it. It went from vital sign report to vital sign assessment. Sounded pretty benign, let's just change the title. Unfortunately, what changes the title is a data field, a discrete data field, that is being used by a reporting mechanism that compiles the entire medical record and exports it to the medical records department. By changing that name, this process, this application that's doing the compiling, no longer finds the vital signs. So therefore, every medical record, legal medical record that is residing in medical records from that change forward, no longer has any vital signs present. That's serious. So these are the kinds of things where, when I was working at the hospital, not everybody had access to make the changes. Those department SMEs, even some of the clinical informatics analysts, even some of the support desk and the IT operations analysts didn't always have all the access to actually make the changes. And it was to prevent people from doing things on the fly and making rash decisions without understanding the full scope of the consequences. Many of the current house-wide electronic medical records are using some form of rules engine processing, data analysis, or business process management application. Those are very intricate and sometimes logic intensive, to where one small detail, it could be as simple as a comma or an ampersand. It could be as simple as deciding the NICU blood pressure needs to begin with an N in the discrete data field for NBP instead of the house-wide BP. All of those things can break many different areas of those other business process management applications, rules engines applications, scheduling applications, or reports. The other thing that happens with reporting is a lot of times the people that are requesting the reports are looking for an end result. They want to know how many people had a blood pressure less than 100 in the last 12 hours. It's that simple. In the background is all of the logic that is sitting there listening for every time somebody saves a vital sign documentation. And if that documentation does have different findings, it would be very easy if BP meant blood pressure everywhere. But maybe there are reasons why there is a central pressure versus a CVP, central venous pressure finding, that is very different than a blood pressure finding, a BP finding, that might be by putting the cuff on your arm and pumping it up. This report may need to consider both of those findings or multiple findings. This report may only be considering one finding, and if that one finding gets changed, the report is no longer valid. The repercussions from a lack of change control or lack of change management, lack of communication around change control or management can have far-reaching repercussions, some of them even to the point of causing patient harm. The next thing about change management and change control that needs to be considered is the education. So we talked about adoption by allowing the end users to have some say in how the application looks, how it feels, even if they don't get the change they request, to be able to let them participate and explain to them why it may not be able to be done can alleviate a lot of the stress. Remember, I've said other times, understanding the why something is the way it is, or how something is the way it is, makes the why make more sense, or understanding why makes the how make more sense. If I can explain to you why you have to click 2 places instead of 1, and why that affects something else downstream, then knowing that the how, that you have to click 2 places, is a little easier to do than me just telling you, you got to click 2 places because that's just the application. That can be frustrating. So he talks about adoption by getting the users involved. The next piece of that adoption is the change itself and providing education. Remember earlier on we talked about change is not, it's not the fear of change, it's not the fear of a new way of doing, it's a fear of the loss of the old ways of doing. The old way was comfortable. The old way you knew how to do it. The old way you didn't have to think about it. It was like muscle memory. We've always done it that way. If people understand the change and they are expecting the change to come, they're going to be less afraid of losing the old ways of doing, particularly with good education, so that they're practiced and that change becomes familiar. That new way of doing becomes familiar to them. Please keep in mind with any change, even from an education perspective or from just notifying a change is coming, is 7 times 7 ways. People learn and perceive information differently. Some people are good at reading plain text. Some people are better off seeing pictures and text. Some people have to have a video with audio. Some people have to be hands-on and like to interact. You can facilitate all of these different ways to communicate a change is coming and provide education. You can have a PowerPoint that is looping or a video that's looping that is describing the change and visually showing you how to do the new documentation from screen to screen. You can use a Camtasia type product and actually allow the user to participate in clicking on the screens. They can practice how to do the change. You can provide them with access to a test environment and a login that allows them to go in and practice how the documentation and play with it and see what the change is like. Written posters that might be placed in strategic locations, like above the toilet seat, above the garbage can in the employee break room. The positioning of the screens and of the video looping so that they're in areas people will see them. Sometimes it might be mounting the video monitor above the water cooler or where the coffee is in the break room, because people are going to stand there for at least 20 seconds while they're pouring a cup of coffee. They're going to start to hear the change, hear the information, and stand there and look at it while they're pouring their coffee. A little bit every day will start to prepare them. About education, you need to make a decision if that education needs to be tracked, or maybe make a recommendation that the education needs to be tracked. It's something that may prevent you from putting in a change right away. If it's a quality measure, core measure, if it's a process improvement that could affect patient care or have an impact on patient care, both positive and negatively if done wrong, that education may need to be tracked before it can go live. So setting up those expectations ahead of time to let users know that are requesting the change is very important. If their expectations are set, then they're not going to be impatient and they will be grateful when the change happens. Another thing about change is a good change process that maybe defines when changes should take place. There's always going to be exceptions to this, and there's always going to be different kinds of changes that may or may not truly have an impact or take a lot of process to make the change. But on the far end, it's saying things as simple as never making a change on a Thursday or Friday. All changes, unless a patient is at risk, patient safety risk, all changes will only be made on Tuesdays. This sets a particular expectation. End users can prepare. They know I work on Tuesday, I'm coming to work Tuesday, there might be a change. It reminds them, oh, today's Tuesday, that's right, this change was coming today. It helps you as the IT analyst be able to control some things. If the change goes badly or poorly, you generally have days of the week where some service support person, potentially from the vendor or another support site, may be more likely to be available. If you do a 5 o'clock on Friday, you're probably the only one in the IT department working on 5 o'clock on Friday, and you will have no help if the change goes poorly. Other things to consider are, like I talked about earlier, is there already a change happening that's requiring downtime or a server reboot? Or the change may be best, depending on how extensive it is, to be done during a low census time. Maybe it's best to do the change on night shift. You still shouldn't do it on a Thursday or Friday, so maybe Wednesday night at midnight isn't good. Still keep it on a Tuesday, but you're doing it Wednesday morning at midnight, or Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. when the census is the lowest in that particular department, or the department that's going to be impacted the most. Those are things that a clinical informatics analyst should be able to sit and analyze: censuses, patient flows, and the best times for certain types of changes to be made, depending on the department that's being the most impacted by the change. It shouldn't be just clinical. That type of change control and change process should encompass everything from the server reboots, the upgrades, application patches, service packs, whether it's a finance department or Microsoft Outlook. Anytime there's a change, that has to be respected, that change could have unforeseen impacts across the entire facility. And at some level, at least a group, usually the IT group, has had some chance to discuss it, plan for it, and come up with that implementation plan. And your implementation plan is going to include everything from what the change is to when it's going to be tested, how the education is going to go out to end users, when it's going to be brought live, how you're going to roll back the change if it goes really wrong. All of that needs to be planned. How is the department going to work during the downtime until the servers come back up? All of that is part of your implementation plan. Communication to the staff, what day of the week it's going to be done on, what day of the month it's going to happen on, how many weeks from now. And again, setting those expectations for the end user. If you come back to the change control meeting, you're the IT analyst that comes back to the change control meeting and says, yes, we've approved the change. Here's the next steps. It's going to take us 2 weeks to get it built in the test environment. It's going to take 2 weeks for the super users to test it at the level of comfort to make sure it's working. We need to plan for education, which right now nurses are 2 weeks into their 12-week schedule. So we need to make sure we can offer the education in 10 weeks to allow schedules to be open and available for education so nurses can schedule their education. So right now we're looking at 16 weeks before go live. That's the type of communication that needs to go out so the expectation is set. From a vendor point of view, if you get to work with a third-party IT department and not in a facility, there's some additional change control things that need to be considered. One of them is, in a perfect world, when you're working inside a facility on their intranet, obviously you have access to a SharePoint or real-time documentation that allows you to communicate these changes, the ticketing system, etc. Oftentimes as a consultant or in a vendor world, you don't have access to their intranet, so therefore some of that communication, those communication tools or documentation may not be as easily accessible. In those cases, you need to have your own form of change control document, and I have several that I use with my clients. And I set that expectation. If they're going to test something for me, test a rule that we built, they need to be very clear if they're going to say it doesn't work, and they need to use that change control document to describe to me step by step how they tested it. I did this first, then I clicked here, then I clicked here, and I clicked there, and this is what I saw. They have to provide me with the test patient information. It might be very different because the patient was an outpatient in a bed versus an inpatient. That simple of a status difference could affect whether or not my rule or my business process management application returns the correct information. So by providing me that information, we then use that change control document as a communication tool. They give me the information that says it doesn't work. I can manage the change control by sorting it, making changes, communicating the change that I made to fix the issue, and notifying them by returning this document that the change is ready to be retested. They can retest it. If it passes, they'll indicate it by putting a P in the column and coloring the row green. If it fails again, they'll turn the row pink to red and put an F in it. And this kind of communication goes back and forth so that we can all use that document to understand what the change is and document what the change was or what the fix was or resolution. It doesn't do me any good, just like they can't tell me, oh, the rule didn't work, it's broke, and not provide me details. It's not fair for me to say, oh, I fixed it, test it now. They're never going to learn that I had to change 4 different sub-rules and this line of logic if I don't tell them. And by letting them know what those changes are, they can start to maintain this themselves. The last part of change control is obviously the maintenance piece, and that's something to think about. The change itself may be minor. It may make your end users happy, but if the maintenance is going to require twice the work resource or twice the work effort every time a new medication is added to the system, since medications are added regularly, then maybe all of the logic and the change that they're asking isn't the best change to make. And maybe you need to have a discussion about a different way to change it, or to make the change, or come up with some out-of-the-box thinking, because the maintenance alone can prevent the change from being reasonable. Just some things to think about. We're almost through with the semester. Thanks so much.